Good afternoon everyone, and welcome to our sunset safari on this beautiful afternoon, and hopefully this chance of rain will arrive at some point, as well as we desperately need it. Now, my name is Tristan, and on camera today I've got Senzo Three Fingers as normal, and it is going to be an interesting afternoon with the storm that was brewing the whole kind of day. I wonder if we aren't going to get a little bit of rain later. Maybe you can send your predictions through on hashtag Safari Live or YouTube chat. That's how you get hold of us. And if you don't want to send any predictions, well, you can ask some questions or just say hello from wherever you're watching. Now, my plan for this afternoon is I'm going to head towards Chitwa, because this morning, in my stricken state with my punctured tire, I heard monkey's alarm calling and had tracks for leopard and heard signs of leopard. So we're going to go and head in that direction for this afternoon and try and see if we can find it. I believe Hasana was seen last night around Chitwa camp, so that's probably where we're going to head. But before we do all of that, we've got to do a few time lapses, so we're going to go quickly to Treehouse Dam, and that is the plan for this afternoon. That's at least what we're going to try and accomplish. Whether or not we're going to be lucky, I'm not quite sure. I'm hoping that we will be, and maybe with the storm that will hopefully roll in a little bit later after the drive, because we don't want a big massive storm during drive, because that might just put a bit of a dampener on things. But hopefully the storm will come back towards the late part of the drive and into the evening, and we'll get an amazing sort of lightning display to finish up our drive. That's what I'm kind of hoping for. A leopard in a tree with the stormy clouds in the background would also not go amiss, that is for sure. Now, I do apologize if I'm squinting. For some reason it feels very glary out here this afternoon. It's probably because it's been quite cloudy the last little bit, and being out now and out of FC where it's been nice and dark is a little bit bright, so I do apologize if I'm squinting a little bit. But while I kind of negotiate my way to Treehouse Dam and see what's lurking around that area, let's go across to my friend Noelle, who seems as though she's had a long day. She went out towards town and has come back again, and I'm sure she's got a few stories for all of you, and let's go see what she's got to say.
Good afternoon, and yes, thank you, my friend Tristan. Town was town. I thought it was going to hail, but as you can see, no rain, no hail, thank goodness. I am Noelle. We are live, we are interactive. You can ask us questions, hashtag Safari Live on the Twitter, or follow us on the YouTube chat. And with me, I've got Vildy on camera, back from leave, nice and refreshed, and in a fabulous, fabulous mood. Okay, I had homework from yesterday, and part of my homework had to deal with ducks and geese. So Vildy and I have found you some ducks/geese. All right, Egyptian geese that are really ducks. So we talked briefly about plumage yesterday, with ducks having brighter plumage than geese, and then geese having a longer neck, and a few other things. But the sort of big difference that I've been searching for, a dear friend of me helped me answer as I was scouring my books and couldn't find what I wanted. True geese have a spur on the carpal part of their wing, and ducks do not. So that is the main difference. And so part of the misname with this goose that's really a duck has to do with the fact that it does not have the spur. So we should be seeing, hopefully, spur-winged geese soon. It is coming into the time when we do see them. And for all of you going, Noelle, what is a spur-winged goose and why are you babbling on about them? Let me show you a photo. All right, this beautiful thing here at the top is a spur-winged goose, and they fight with the spurs, the males, with those on the sort of edge right around in there. So that was my homework from yesterday. Thank you all very much. You guys know that I'm learning so much with everybody here and with all of your excellent, excellent questions. All right. Our plan, Villy and I were just talking about it now, our plan is to head to Twin Dams and then maybe over towards Sheeta Cut Line and then maybe up to Biffles Hook Dam. But as you all know, I always give you my plan and then I end up getting tracks or something else catches my very short attention span and we meander off in a completely other direction. So as we are meandering towards Twin Dams, Steph is off on his own 2 feet and he would like to say hello. Let's head on over to him.
Hello and good afternoon and welcome to the Sunset Bushwalk part of this particular safari. I'm Steph Winterboer and today we've got a rare treat. We've got Xander on camera today for the bushwalk, and there in the background we have got some wildebeest that we've been trailing for the last couple of minutes. It's a rare sight to see that many wildebeest in the Sabi Sands, here in the southern part of the Kruger National, well, in the middle part of the Kruger National Park in the southern part of Africa. And the reason for that is that this particular type of bush isn't really conducive to large herds of anything, let alone large herds of wildebeest, which we so, oh well, I would say that we're so used to seeing, but I mean, I think I'm being spoilt and a little bit of a brat by saying that, but that we are used to seeing in the Mara up in Kenya, where there, the wide open plains and the lack of any very thick forests has led to massive herds developing. Well, as part of it anyway. We've got some, I don't exactly know how many wildebeest here, but there's a good dozen or so wildebeest. They are keeping their distance from us, unfortunately, and so what we can do is perhaps speed up just a little bit through here, just to see if we can see them. There's just the backs of them. The reason why they're keeping a little bit more space to us right now is the fact that the wind is blowing from us onto them, and so we're in a bad place from a wind direction point of view, and they're getting this big nostril full of soap, lunch, and whatever else I've been rolling around in and washing my hands with today, and it's not that nice for a wildebeest. Here you go. Now you'll notice immediately that different to the Kenyan wildebeest, this wildebeest is a little bit bigger, although for the life of me I cannot find any reference to comparative weights. And you'll also notice that it doesn't have a white beard, and that is because the wildebeest that we're used to seeing in Kenya have they are a subspecies. They're called the white-bearded gnu, whereas these are commonly called the brindled gnu. Both blue wildebeest or blue gnu, and there's not much to distinguish between them, at least from a genetic point of view, with the exception that the ones in Kenya, as far as I'm concerned, are a little bit smaller, and then they obviously have that very distinguishable white beard and flowing mane that comes off of the neck. Let's see if we can get one more view of them before they run off too far into the distance. Let's see if we can get you a nice shot of a big one, or at least a larger one, so that you can quickly snap off a screenshot and compare it to the ones that you've got of the wildebeest in Kenya. Now that is very typical of wildebeest to hang around with the impala. You may have noticed that they are, even though they've been moving through the bush, they've been moving through the bush together. That's because they really feed on different parts of the plant, plants, I should say. In the wildebeest's case, they feed on grass. On the impala's case, in this particular time of year, they're feeding off of new leaves and shoots as well as some grass. And so they're not in competition with one another for exactly the same food resources. And so having more eyes and ears around one another just helps to look out for those predators. And in an area like this, which is very densely wooded, comparatively speaking, to the open plains of Africa, it's easy for a lion or a leopard to sneak up on an unsuspecting wildebeest or impala, and therefore having more of you around basically allows to see predators far easier. All right, we're going to leave them alone. We don't want to chase them around too much into the bush, and so we're going to send you over to Tristan, who's just busy driving around here this afternoon.
I was driving around, Steph. I've come to a stationary stop, and the reason for that is because there is a vulture sitting up above me, and it's in its nest once again. So this is our little juvenile. I will call it a juvenile now because it's starting to look and resemble an adult quite a lot. Unfortunately, it's a bit glary behind it because of the white cloud, but there sits our young vulture. It's far more upright than the last time we were here, which is in that cold, dreary weather, and it was all kind of hunkered down in its nest and trying to stay nice and warm, whereas now you can see it's up and it's standing and it's looking around, and it looks very much like an adult. In fact, if you didn't know that there was a nest here, you'd probably think that it is a older bird than what it actually is now, and so it is starting to really develop quite nicely. Now, of course, this vulture, as we know, is a white-backed vulture, and so these white-backed vultures, typical for them is to nest during the winter months here in South Africa, and then they raise their chicks all the way through. Now, the thing about it is that it's a very long process for a vulture. Some of the birds that we have out here, they, from sort of laying egg until the bird is fledged and off on its own and under its own care, can sometimes be between sort of 30 and 40 days, so very, very short. Whereas with a vulture, from laying of egg until the time that this vulture leaves the nest can be close to 220 days. So it's almost a year, well, 3/4 of a year that we can call it, that these poor adults have to look after this bird and have to go back and forth and fill up their crops and provide nutrients for these young birds. And it takes a lot of energy and a lot of effort. Also, that coupled with the fact that there's only generally one chick because they kill each other in the nest means that the vulture numbers don't escalate very quickly. And that's why it's such a concern that we're losing vultures at the rate that we are currently, and we're losing them far too quickly for them to be able to replenish their own stocks and for them to be a positive growth that's going on. Now, you might be wondering what causes a lot of our vultures to die. Well, most of it is actually, funny enough, them flying into electrical lines. So because we have put up these massive big electrical pylons all the way through South Africa and various parts of Africa, there's a lot of bird strikes that take place with vultures. They tend to fly into these electrical cables and they get all tangled up, and obviously they die from that. And then now lately there's been a big spate of poisoning, and it's for the sort of black market. You find a situation where, you know, their heads and their feet and wings and all kinds of bits of them are utilized in all different ways, and so unfortunately they are poisoned en masse by that, or in that process. The other big problem that we've got is we've got a number of farmers that border these areas that have wildlife, and you then get things like leopard and jackals and caracals that get out, and they unfortunately kill a lot of livestock, and so farmers sometimes will poison carcasses to try and poison that individual, and unfortunately vultures and battalier eagles and any sort of scavenger gets caught up in this whole process and is poisoned and unfortunately then expires. So it's a big problem, and there's a lot of stuff going into trying to get vultures' name out there, and particularly to dispel this connotation of a horrible, dirty, ugly animal. Unfortunately, vultures suffer a lot of the effects of being portrayed as ugly birds, and much like hyenas in the mammal world, they're seen as these horrible individuals. Just because they eat rotting meat doesn't mean that they are horrible things, and it doesn't mean that they are not vitally important to what we have out here. Without these guys, we would have a massive amount of disease that would be out, rotting flesh all over the place, which, as we know, can produce a lot of flies and all kinds of other things. And so they are hugely important to our ecosystem, and losing them is a very, very big problem. So we need to try and protect them as much as possible. And it's sad because most of the vulture species now have been added to endangered species lists, and which is not really a very good thing at all. So that's why it's encouraging when we get a chick like this that has done so well and is raising to this point, and hopefully will leave the nest as a fully fledged adult at some point. Francis, you want to know how long before it leaves the nest? Well, Francis, difficult to say because I'm not quite sure the exact day that it hatched out of its egg. So my rough estimate is somewhere around January, I would imagine. Might be a little bit before that, but December, January, maybe into February if things don't go according to plan, but that's where I roughly estimate that it should be. So we know that this, I think, was first seen at the end of June, if I'm not mistaken, or beginning of July by Byron, and it was a tiny little chick at that stage. And so if we kind of work out 180 days from there, it should be around December, January, somewhere in that general vicinity. So hopefully around there. We'll keep checking on it and keep monitoring it, because eventually we will see it doing short little flights from here, and it'll then come back and land, and it'll hop about, and it'll do all kinds of things from this particular section. And so hopefully we'll be able to kind of monitor its progress. Once it takes off and it leaves this nest without actually tagging it or anything like that, it's going to be virtually impossible to follow who this vulture is. We see a lot of different vultures here, and so once it's gone from the nest, unfortunately, that's going to be it in terms of following its progress. But at least we can see a day-to-day life of a vulture and kind of come back and forth. And I'm sad in a way that I haven't found any interaction between the adults and the young one since I've been watching this nest. Every time I come here, either the adults have already been and they've been sitting for quite some time, or the adults aren't here. I would really like to see a situation where an adult lands and comes to this chick, and there's that whole interaction and greeting and feeding process that happens. But we can only try and deal with what we're given, and hopefully one day we will get to see it in the next few days, and hopefully there'll be a carcass nearby that's fairly large that vultures can feed off, and maybe from there we'll see it coming back to the nest at some point. Right, but we're going to leave our vulture to itself, let it enjoy its afternoon. I'm sure it's very, very happy because that it hasn't rained, and lightning and thunder and stormy weather has now gone, because if you're a vulture and a bird, wet, feathers can't be very pleasant, and ultimately they don't have a roof over their head, so having a wet home would mean that it would be a long damp evening. So we're going to try and negotiate quickly this mitre drain. There we go. Now, I haven't been to Treehouse Dam yet. I'm still on my way there. I'm just kind of checking areas that I haven't driven for quite some time. I haven't been down this way since Shadow and Cub had that kill on Zoe's, and so I just want to scratch around and see maybe Shadow and Cub's tracks somewhere in this area. We haven't seen them for a few days, so I wouldn't mind just having a look around and maybe get lucky with them somewhere here. I also know that they like to move towards Treehouse Dam via the Firebreak or somewhere from Shabamu side, and so it makes sense just to check this area and just thoroughly comb around and make sure that there isn't some sign of them in this area before we move on and go somewhere else. Like I say, I am going to head to Chitwa, but I'm waiting for the Chitwa guests to get out of the lodge because I don't want to go scratching around their lodge for a leopard when there's guests in camp. Might be an awkward moment if we come around a bend and there's somebody using the outdoor shower, as has happened to me before at many of these camps. It's not ideal, but it does happen, and it's some entertaining stories, I can tell you that, of coming around the front of lodges and finding things that you really didn't want to see, as you can all imagine. Now, while I contemplate the atrocities that I've seen in my time as a guide in front of camps, let's cross over to Steph and see what he's up to, where he's heading this afternoon, and what his plans are. I'm sure there'll be something interesting along the way. There generally is with Steph. I'm sure he's looking forward to looking for lots of little things in the afternoon heat after a thunderstorm.
It's actually funny that Tristan said that, because exactly as he said it, we were debating whether or not we should walk in front of a camp right now. Amazing, eh? Like mines, I suppose. The little insect that you have buzzing into and out of the screen over there is actually a species of bee and is attracted to the reflection of the light. But it's a stingless bee called a mopani bee, and they live in this particular area. They live both in cavities in the wood and in cavities that they excavate in the ground, and can get infuriating. Now, they do produce a very nice honey, and in some folklore they say you can actually get drunk on the honey that they feed off of, the nectar that they feed off of is from poisonous plants, and that then is distilled in their honey and can create intoxicating effects. I've never had mopani bee honey, so I can't comment on that specific trait, so until proven otherwise, let's just say it's true, right? Now, I'm looking for something small here in the sunlight. It is a troop of dwarf mongoose that ran away from us because they got a fright. But I don't think that I think they were just moving away from the fact that we're strange. I don't think that they didn't look terrified. There they are moving there. So come with me a little bit and let's see if we can show you one of them. It takes a long time to habituate mongoose to people on foot. Okay, I see where they are resting up for the day. So there's a termite mound in the back over there. You can just see it sticking out behind the guari bush, and in one of the cavities in the side of that termite mound is a little face of a dwarf mongoose. And Xander's going to do a heroic effort of trying to focus through a moving bush for you. We'll see if we can get a little bit closer. Now, very different to how animals perceive us on foot. How animals perceive us in the vehicle to how animals perceive us on foot. And that's because bipedal man is the most aggressive, most violent, and most vicious predator on the face of the earth. And animals that have basically stood in our way are extinct. And at a genetic level, I feel at least anyway, most animals have an instinctive fear of bipedal man, whereas man sitting in a car for the last 100 years has done nothing to any of these animals here. They've been protected in the Kruger National Park, and I think this is about as close as we can get. What we'll do is we will just sit and focus on that termite mound. Right, we're going to see if these dwarf mongoose relax a little bit more at our presence. And in the meantime, why don't you go and have a look at what Noelle's looking at.
All right, amazingly, this tiny little antelope has not run away. Usually they see us, they stop for half a second and then bolt. But she has laid down in the shade, in the grass, not far from us, maybe about 8 meters. This is a tiny little female Steenbok. So Steen in Afrikaans means brick. So this is a brick-colored bok, and a bok is an antelope. And she is territorial with her lifelong mate. You don't always see them together, but you can from time to time. And they're both territorial in the area. Then there she bolts. Ooh! So that's what she usually does. We are so lucky. Oh, Vildy, your camera work, brilliant. Oh, you see, she stops and she's checking everything out. She's listening probably to me talking. You can see that beautiful coloration. And now she's decided she's fine and gonna have something to eat. So the Steenbok are grazers. They eat grass. And they do something that's really interesting that I've only personally seen a handful of times. You don't always catch them do it. When they mark their territory using their dung, they go to the toilet and then they push the sand up around it, similar to what your house cat would do inside the litter box. And she's grooming herself a little bit there. And it's a very interesting behavior for an antelope to have. It's not a normal antelope species behavior at all. And it has to do with the small size of their territories and wanting to make sure that they mark their territory for other Steenbok, but also cover up the scent so that predators aren't immediately aware that they're there. In a very sort of brief explanation of why they do that. So with tiny little antelopes like this, Steenbok, Duiker, Klipspringer, and I believe Dik as well. We don't get Dik here, but you should see Dik up in the Mara, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly. The females will be larger than the males, and part of that has to do with them having to carry their young and just needing to have a little bit larger body size. So another way to tell would be horns. She doesn't have horns, but he would have horns. And they're tiny, 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 tiny. She's being nice to stick around. So her coloration and the way that she appears, even the inside of her ears, which we could briefly see just then, all of that is for camouflage and for blending in. And you saw when she was sitting in the grass in the beginning, she really can get herself down. The grass covers most of her body, and then the ears coming up and giving a little bit, I wouldn't quite call it disruptive marking, but a similar scenario would be that disruptive marking. So we're very lucky here. We see quite a few Steenbok, and we also see quite a few Duiker. Usually in the low feld, you would see more Duiker over Steenbok, and then other places I've worked, more Steenbok over Duiker. And Duikers are browsers, and then the Steenboks are grazers we talked about. So it has a lot to do just with the type of vegetation that's around and the dominant type of vegetation. Fantastic! We never get to see Steenbok for that long, so that's a special little sighting. Sorry. Steph is making friends with Mongoose apparently over on his walk, so let's head back to him and see what he has to say.
And what we've done is we've sat down pretty close to this particular mound where these mongoose have been holed up in. And of course their natural curiosity has asserted itself. And you can see one just sticking his head up there watching me. Now, I'm not facing this particular termite mound because that'll be a little bit too antagonistic. But I'm just sitting sideways to them, and they cannot help but come out and have a look at what we're doing. Obviously very quick to disappear if I make the slightest wrong move. Because I'm not getting any closer, there's a good chance that they just stick their heads out again and have a look at us. Now, every single day these dwarf mongoose will find a new place to go and sleep, and that's because they make quite tasty morsels for a bunch of different predators. And so within their home range, which they defend quite actively against other families of mongoose, they will have a bunch of these sleeping holes, and they will spend the evenings in there. They're not nocturnal, they're diurnal, and they come out late in the morning. They enjoy having the odd suntan in the morning on the side of a termite mound, and then spend the day foraging for invertebrates mainly, but will take on snakes, will take on birds' eggs and lizards. And as we saw the other day with Noel, they're not shy of tackling some of the most dangerous snakes in Africa. For those of you who didn't see that particular piece of footage, we saw a troop of mongoose, dwarf mongoose, chase a very large black mamba, which is one of the most venomous of our African snakes and one of the most dangerous as well, up into the top of a tree, and only when the mongoose went away did the snake decide to come down and carry on with its day, and looked quite wary as well. So I think this has proven too much now for this particular mongoose troop. I don't even hear them making any of their alarm calls anymore. So before we stress them out anymore, I think, why don't we move on? Let them carry on. There's not a lot of grubs and insects around at the moment. It's still the beginning of summer, and they're going to need all the time that they can get to try and feed. I don't want to steal any of that feeding time from them. It's nice to spend time with animals on foot, especially if you're having a little or limited amount of an impact on the way that they do and go about their day. I tend to judge the way we do these walks, and in particular the interactions that we have with these animals, based on how much reaction those animals are having to us. I consider a 10 out of 10 walk being able to get close to and be part of a particular animal's space, but without them even knowing you're there. And I consider a total and utter failure when we have animals react to our presence and react aggressively to us. Now, Deadhead Com, you'd like to know if I've ever had an animal chase me on bushwalk? Most certainly. That ideal of not having not having a violent interaction with animals or an aggressive reaction from animals is an ideal, and not often achieved, because animals' senses are so much better than ours that sometimes you just stumble into things without actually knowing. And I suppose the closest shave I've ever gotten in my life was a couple of years ago, where we were looking at a track of a civet on the floor, and an elephant had heard us coming down the road, but because we had stopped making a noise, he came walking down the road to see what we were doing. And by the time he came around the bend and we had stood up from the civet track, we were way too close to one another, and he was in must and decided that we were definitely not needed in that particular piece of the bush, and he chased us around for a good 20, it felt like a good 400 hours, to be honest. It couldn't have been more than 10 or 12 minutes or so, eventually resulting in him scattering the group of people that I was with into the bush. I had to dive off the end of this drainage bed and onto the sand. I left people in the bush all over the place. Definitely not a highlight in my guiding career, in my professional guiding career. And we were lucky to escape with our lives. The elephant was lucky to escape without me having to shoot him. And so, I mean, all in all, it was good, but it was definitely a very, very close shave. I was nervous of doing bushwalks for a couple of weeks after that. This is quite nice. This is a natural insect repellent called Ocimum canum, or wild basil, and you pick the leaves like this, and then you just rub it on your feet where you're most likely to encounter ticks, which is always at these sock protectors that I have, and it acts as a natural insect repellent. It's got this lovely sort of sweet basil smell, and then there's apparently repellent for ticks. Alright, we're going to carry on looking for something awesome to show you, and you're off to Tristan.
Well, you are indeed, and a very, very, very warm welcome to the three schools that have just joined us this afternoon. So to Glenwood, Brookwood and North Landing Elementaries, it's wonderful to have you along with us this afternoon, and I hope that you're going to enjoy the next 45 minutes as we try and show you as many wonderful things in Africa as possible. My name is Tristan, and on camera today I do have Senzo, and so remember, this is interactive, which means you guys can ask every question that you have about all the animals and all the wonderful things that we're going to see this afternoon, and you can just ask the questions to your teachers, and your teachers will then send them to us, and we'll try and answer as many as possible. Now, what I'm trying to do this afternoon is I'm trying to find a leopard, but it's still very warm, and so what I'm doing is just driving along some of the water holes, trying to check where there's water, because often on a hot day like this, animals will come and drink water. The other reason why I'm here is because this morning I saw an impala that was in this area that was very pregnant, and I think that it might have had a little baby, and so I'm trying to see if I can find it somewhere here. We spotted one just now running along, and so maybe, just maybe, we can find it. Senzo, can you see it or not? So Senzo is busy looking around that side. Maybe Senzo has spotted something. I'm not quite sure. What have you got there, Senz? Is it a bird, Senz? Oh, there we go. So Senzo's got a woodpecker. Now it's a bearded woodpecker that's all the way in the distance. Can you see that? Isn't that amazing? So this woodpecker is going to go along the tree like this, and it's going to use its sharp beak to try and headbutt the tree effectively and chisel its way into a tree. So it's going to dig its way in to try and get beetles that have laid their larvae inside there, and these little beetles go inside the wood, and it makes a perfect place for woodpeckers to find food, because woodpeckers love beetles for lunch. And it's interesting because woodpeckers have a very, very, very special way that they're able to hit their head against the tree and not get a headache. I don't know if you've ever hit your head against something, and you'll maybe know that your head gets very, very sore if you hit your head hard against something. Now imagine trying to do that against a tree all day long. So woodpeckers have to have funny things in place to be able to keep them from being hurt. And one thing that they do have that helps a lot is their tongue. Now their tongue is very, very long. It's much longer than our tongues, and their tongue actually goes from the back of their head. So it starts here and it goes over their head like this, all the way down, and then through their beak and into their mouth like that. And so that means that when they hit, that tongue acts as a cushion, and so it doesn't hurt as much. Also, their brain is inside a fluid, and so as they hit, the brain can move without actually hitting up against the skull and causing any damage to the brain. It's very, very clever. And then once they find a little hole, and they've made a hole and they've found what they're looking for, they'll stick that long tongue inside there, and then they grab that little insect and they pull it back out again. Isn't that a wonderful way to find food, and a very clever way to keep your head from being sore all day long? Unfortunately though, our woodpecker has flown away, and so I'm going to try and see if I can find our little impala, because hopefully it's got a tiny, tiny baby. It's this time of year that they do give birth to the little ones. North Landing, you want to know if the Wildebeest migration occurs here in South Africa. So no, it doesn't occur here, unfortunately, but we do have a couple of guys up in the Masai Mara. Unfortunately today they're not out with us. They're having the afternoon off, and so they're not with us, but we do have guys that are up there that are filming the migration. It's also not the right time of year for the migration now in Kenya where we are, so it has a situation where the wildebeest will go out of Kenya normally in around August, September, October, and so now in November unfortunately the migration's not there. But that's up further north from us, way away from where we are, about 2,500 miles away, so it's a long way away, and those animals are moving around in that system. So hopefully next year we'll be able to show you the migration when we're in Kenya again, and hopefully we'll be able to see it then. But where we are now, unfortunately not. What's that, Senz? So I thought Senzo spotted something, but he says nope, nothing, he's all good. Now where is my impala? I'm sure it's here somewhere. Yes, Hannah, the woodpeckers will most definitely peck different trees. So what you'll find is they'll go onto a tree, and they like trees that have had some little bit of elephant damage. So when I say elephant damage, what I'm talking about, I'll show you just now. Just let me show you these two animals that are running away quickly. Those are called duikers. So duikers are a small antelope. They are probably the size of a medium-sized dog, so a very, very small dog, and they run around, and they're the second smallest antelope that we have out here. That's a fully grown adult that we've got that just ran away, and there was actually two of them. But I was talking about woodpeckers and trees and what they feed off. So I was saying that they like trees that have a bit of damage that the elephants have made. Now there's a big tall tree to my left here, and on that tree you'll see that there's a little bit of bark that has been torn away by the elephants, because the elephants, they like to eat bark, and so they dig their tusk in and they pull the bark off. And what that does is that means that the bark which protects the tree is no longer there, and that allows for the insects to be able to eat their way into the wood and where they then sit. And so the woodpecker will go and find trees like this wherever there's some wood that is exposed, and those insects that are in there, and then it will go and try and feed off them. So they'll feed off all kinds of different trees looking for insects and various beetles and grubs that they can find inside there. But not all woodpeckers that we get in this area feed off the trees. There are some woodpeckers that we get here, like the Bennett's woodpecker, that will feed on the ground, and that woodpecker will try and find ants and termites and those kind of things, and it will peck little holes in the ground looking for food. So not all of them feed out of the trees. Right, we're going to leave that tree alone. That tree is still healthy. The elephants didn't manage to damage that one too much. Now, I'm not the only one out here this afternoon. I've got a very good friend who is driving around, and she is out and about also in the Sabi Sands looking for all kinds of wonderful things, and she's been telling me that she's very excited to say hello to all of you. So let's go across and see what she's up to and what she's looking for today.
Hello everyone, hello North Landing, Brockwood and Glenwood Elementaries. Thank you for joining us. So I believe today you are talking about habitats and adaptations and structures in the environment. My name is Noelle. We are interactive, so you can send us questions as much as you would like. And on camera I have Vildy saying hello, thumbs up. So don't forget hashtag Safari Live on the Twitter and YouTube chat. Oh, but before I carry on anymore, Tristan has something really special to show you. I'm going to head you back over to my friend Tristan, who has something teeny tiny and very cute.
Look at this. I was saying that we saw an antelope here today called an impala that was pregnant, and I thought it was going to have a baby today. And look, there's the little baby. It's only a few hours old. I would say not even 3 or 4 hours. It's still a little bit wet in places. Mom hasn't quite cleaned it off just yet, and it's still very shy. So it's going to try and find some shade where it can hide away and start to drink some of Mom's milk to get nice and strong. But isn't that amazing? When we're little babies, I don't know if any of you have some brothers or sisters that are still very small, you'll know that it's difficult for us to walk or to be able to talk or to do any of those things. But with the impalas, because there's lots of predators here like lions and leopards and hyenas and wild dogs, it means that the little babies have to be able to move very early, and so they are born, and within 5 minutes the little baby is starting to struggle to its feet, and within about 15 minutes it's already starting to run, which is very cool. So I'm going to go around. There's a little corner here that we might be able to see and might get a better view. Colin, you're wondering if there are any animals that are blending in the bushes. I think that's what the question was. I hope I got that right. But yes, there are many animals. A lot of animals here, we won't even see them. So we'll get things like leopards that are really well camouflaged, that are shy, and they'll hang around in the thickets, and it takes a lot of effort to spot them. Or we'll get snakes or scorpions or lizards or birds that are all very well camouflaged and very difficult to see. Now I'm going to try and stop just a little bit forward here because I think the little baby might be visible from here. Let's just try. There's lots of trees in the way. There we go, Senzo. Can you see all right there? I know it's not great because there's lots of trees, but this little baby is so cute. Just to the left. Oh, it's gone behind the termite mound now. So it's going forward a little bit. I'm going to try. There's another little gap that I'm going to try and see. You can see Mom is still a little bit nervous. Normally we'll find a thing with these adults will try and kind of just sit and watch us. They're not too worried about where we are, but when they've got babies, they tend to move along quite quickly and they don't really sit for very long at all. So I'm going to stop here a little bit ahead and maybe I'll get lucky and we'll be able to see. Now, Macy, you want to know how the antelopes get away from predators. Well, Macy, they are very fast. These antelopes are running at close to 50 miles an hour, and that's faster than what a leopard can run. And so the antelopes will, if they spot a leopard, will try and run away and get out of the area. But also antelope have very good eyesight and very good ears. Look at the size of their ears compared to their head. Very large ears to be able to hear what's going on, and a big eye to be able to see what's happening. And so they can pick up predators very well, and they're always looking out for danger. And you see, look, Mom is giving it a little bit of a grooming. And I was saying earlier that it hasn't quite been cleaned by Mom just yet, so Mom will keep cleaning it and just groom it and get rid of any of the sort of fur that's not supposed to be there, or any bit of afterbirth that is on it, and make sure that it is clean. But look, you see it's still wobbly. How cute is that? Right, now our little baby is going into some shade and into a little thicket where it's going to try and hide away from us, and I don't want to stress it any more than we have already, and so I'm going to move away from this area. But while I move away, Noelle has found the biggest and the most amazing animals that we get out here in the African bush.
How cute was that baby impala? And baby impala are the cutest things ever. All right, but we have some more cuteness. Not as tiny by any means as those impala, but we have some elephants for you. So elephants are very interesting. I know you all are also talking about habitats. Elephants are the architects of the bush. So they're the ones that dictate, in general, when all the ecosystems are functioning properly. They dictate how the environment looks. So they uproot large trees, push them over. They deposit dung that will have fruits from trees that helps to establish new species coming up. They play an important role. So their habitat is very varied. They live from the deserts of Namibia to the plains of Amboseli in East Africa and Masai Mara to our what we call the bushveld or the low veld down here. So veld is a field or an area, and then bush being bushes, and then low meaning where we reside compared to sea level, so the low veld area. So they're busy moving in an interesting pattern because the marula trees have started to fruit. So the marulas are not quite ripe yet, but they are investigating the trees that they're going to. Vildi is reading my mind perfectly. He is showing you a beautiful marula tree. What they love to do is they love to eat the bark, but this time of year it is definitely the fruits, and the fruits have a lot of vitamin C. So that female, not the one that's walking there, the one that's just behind that one, we'll see her again just now, is busy picking up those fruits off the ground. Isabella, you're curious about why elephants like bark. So Isabella, everything that an elephant eats has a nutritional value, and different times of the year have different nutritional values. So the bark, especially in times when there's no leaves or fruit, with a lot of the trees they like to eat, is going to be very, very sweet and full of yummy nutrients for them to get. So that is why they like the bark. They also like roots, and they like tubers, similar to potatoes, and they like grass, and as I said before, leaves. Kiddos, I just want to back up because we're going to get a really great visual of them coming past our vehicle. And now remember, we are watching wild animals in the wild, but they are used to us as part of their natural environment. They see us as something that always occurs here, and we work very hard to keep that happening. So we are going to position for them to come past, and you'll be able to enjoy. I'm sorry, Chris, can you just repeat the name and the question one more time for me, please? Adeline, you're wondering if I get out of the vehicle and pet the animals. Adeline, no, we don't do that. These are wild animals. They're not pets. They're also not animals that have been put through the interesting procedures of being very closely associated with humans. These are in their natural habitat. So if I were to get out of the car now and walk towards those elephants would be so upset. So I was saying earlier that they're used to our presence, but we have what's a sort of contract with them, a social contract. So basically, I respect their personal space and they respect my personal space. If I get out of my vehicle and go up and try and touch them, they are going to say, hey, listen, that is way too close to my personal space. Please back off, please go away. And in return for me not misbehaving that way, they come up and walk past the vehicle and move around us and function with us as part of their environment without being too extra cheeky. Look, every individual personality is different, but yeah, and it's very important to remember as well with these wild animals, as much as you would like to go up and interact with them as the similar way you would do with your pet dog, your pet cat, they need to be respected on a bit of a higher level, because of the importance that they have within keeping our environments healthy and our ecosystems healthy as well. It's a really interesting topic, Adeline, about how much interaction we should have with wildlife, and something that's pretty in depth, and everyone has their own different opinions on it, but for us, we are observing and then teaching as opposed to forcibly interacting, if that makes sense. If you have more questions, please let me know. Kaylin, so you're asking, what do elephants use their horns for? So, Kaylin, elephants don't have horns, they have tusks, which you can see Vildy's just focused in nicely on those tusks. Those tusks are your two front teeth. So I'm touching my two front teeth right now. You guys can touch your two front teeth. That's what's coming out. A horn, rhinos have on the front of their face a horn, and then impalas have horns. They're different things. The horn on the front of a rhino is made up of the same material as your hair or your fingernails, very tightly woven together. A horn on an antelope species is bone that comes out of the skull, and then it's covered in what's called a keratin sheath. So that same material that your hair and your fingernails are made out of and what the rhino horn is made over makes a hard sheath around that horn. So these tusks that are on the elephant, or tush if you prefer, are used for defense and for fighting, but they're used more for eating. So they'll take a tush and they'll rip it up the side of a tree to help loosen the bark, and then they take their trunk and rip the bark off and then eat it. They also use it when they're busy trying to take leaves or branches off of trees to sort of stabilize it, because they have 2 arms and 2 legs. I know it looks like they have 4 legs, but the way that the joints are is 2 arms and 2 legs. But they don't have hands like we have. So they have a trunk to help them, and they have a tush to be able to help them. But there are some elephants who never grow tush, similar to us humans. Some of us grow wisdom teeth, and some of us don't. That same idea. Avery, you're curious about why the elephant is flapping its ears. You guys are asking the best questions today. Keep them coming. I'm loving them. So elephants get hot just like we get hot. When we get hot, we sweat. Elephants don't sweat. They need to be able to cool themselves down though. And so what they're doing is they're flapping their ears, and behind the ear is a lot of veins. And every time they flap the ear like that, it's helping the blood circulate, which is cooling their body down. So they lose about 82% of their entire body heat through their ears. I don't know if any of you live in cold climates. When it's winter time and it's cold and snowing by you, if you live in those areas, and your mother tells you to put a hat on your head to keep you warm, that's because we also lose a lot of the heat, not just from sweating, but from the top of our head. So if you're hot, don't wear a hat. If you're cold, put a hat on, and that will help. So it's similar with the elephants, flapping when they're cold, when they're hot, and then when they're cold, they put their ears flat. It is very humid and hot today, so that's why those ellies are flapping their ears. Just confirm for me, Kirst, it's Gracie. All right, Gracie, you're wondering if elephants migrate and go to other places. Gracie, that's a super good question. So all of the movements that elephants use, they don't have a territory. They just have what is called a home range. And within that home range, they've got areas that they go to in summer and areas that they use more in winter. And that has to do with the type of food resources that they have. So for us, in the area that we're in, the ranges for the elephants, the home ranges for the elephants, are based upon seasons that are, we've got a really long summer, a really short winter, and barely a spring or a fall. And so it's basically what's fruiting and when, where is the good grass and when, where do we get bark and roots when, etc., etc. But somewhere like Botswana, there's places in Botswana that during our dry season, which is our winter season, it is so dry that there's nothing, there's no water, there's no food, so they have to move really far distances to get to places where there's food or water. And the matriarch, who's the head of the breeding herd, she will know exactly where to go. So they don't migrate like Wildebeest do, but they have a memory, a very good memory of where all of the good food and water is and where they must be at certain times of the year to find that and access that. An interesting point there, so in South Africa, because we have so many humans, we have fencing along sometimes a whole reserve or along just a boundary. So for us, there's far to our west there's a boundary, and then everything to our east is open, and it's huge. You can fit, I'm trying to think, in Kruger National Park, which is right next door to us, you can fit the whole state of Israel in there. And then where we are, just on the western side of Kruger National Park, if you add in all those other parks that are sort of all connected to each other, we're sitting somewhere around 7 million hectares. 7 million acres, 7 million acres. I mean, it's huge. It's really big. So they tried to move elephants from one part of this area into another part of the area, and the elephants weren't happy with that, and a few weeks later they just ended up back where they like to be. So the elephants really need to be comfortable where they are, and then they know exactly where they want to move. So I guess you could call them mini migrations. It's not technically a migration, just a movement within their home range, but yeah, I mean, a tiny little mini one, maybe, before we get too pedantic. All right, Steph is out on his bushwalk, and he would like to show you something along the way there, and we're going to move around and see if we can get another visual of our elephants.
Just have a look at what we've managed to find over here, and hello to the bushwalk, part of the whole safari, to all of you out there. My name is Steph. And this is obviously a dead buffalo that we found here. This buffalo died about a year and a half ago now. And you can see how over the course of the last year and a half, the sun has bleached the bones nice and white, and the rain has washed all the leftover bits and pieces of meat off of this buffalo skull. Isn't this just amazing? Let me show you how big a buffalo actually is. Let me see if I can pick up these horns. Just have a look at that. Isn't that incredible? That's a buffalo's head, and it was too heavy for me to pick up. It's massive, eh? You can see how wide my hands are apart, and a buffalo will use his horns to hook at lions, hook up the lion, and toss it with a massive head, and fling it around. Isn't that just the most beautiful buffalo? He must have been a very impressive character when he was a little bit older. Here we go. Here's his bottom jaw. With this, he would have eaten all the grass that he wanted to eat, or could eat. This looks like it's one of the jaws here. Let's see if we can get this back onto him and restore him to some of his former glory. There's the one. It's like building a puzzle. There's the other one. And would have been joined by some cartilage. Now, Horace, you'd like to know if the buffalo is a male or a female? Most definitely a male, Horace. And I know that because of the presence of this massive horn. Females also have horns, but males are the only ones that have what we call a boss. And this is a boss. You can see how solid this is and how overdeveloped it is. Now, males use these bosses to wrestle with one another, and they wrestle each other, and over time this boss will wear nice and smooth and will actually, in really old buffalo, almost be like a helmet rather than like this one. This guy probably died in his prime. He looks like he's got very little damage to him. The only thing that did get to him, obviously, was the drought at that particular time of year, and that's what killed him. And then the weakened state. The lions must have killed him. Now, Gabriel, you like to know, how did the buffalo lose its skin? It was probably eaten by a variety of different animals. Firstly, it would have been eaten by the lions that killed him. Now, I'm assuming that it was lions that killed him because at the time there was a pride of lion living in this area, and they were picking off these buffalo, these very hungry, skinny buffalo, as they were coming to a nearby pan to get some water. And firstly, the lions would have eaten the skin. What they left behind, the hyenas would have gotten. Then jackal, and then a whole bunch of insects would have had their turn to eat the leftover buffalo, starting with flies and all their maggots, and that wasn't very nice because you can imagine what that must have smelt like at that time. And lastly, but not leastly, would have been a bunch of beetles we call carrion beetles, which eat the fur and the skin left over well, that would have been left over after all those other animals had finished. Isn't it nice? Now, these buffalo, I figured out a trick with these buffalo the other day. You know, sometimes you get caught in the bush and you need to have a toilet seat. And I figured out that you can use the pelvic bone of a buffalo. This is the pelvis, which sits in the hip area. It's where the legs are attached to, the back legs, and would have looked something like that at the time. You can use this as a very handy toilet seat if you get stuck. Now I'm just going to loan some more of this buffalo and see if that'll work. This is a part of its spine, and we can use that as the front part of the seat. You just got to get the base nice, and there you go. You got yourself a nice toilet seat that you can use. So this old buffalo is still proving useful, even though he's lying over here enjoying more sun and more rain than grass at the moment. And isn't that just the coolest thing? You could pretty much put this whole buffalo back together again if you wanted to. But we're not going to do that. That's a puzzle for another day. In the meantime, what we thought we'd do to you, for you at least anyway, is show you something that is living and with Noelle right now.
Look how amazing she is with her trunk and utilizing that trunk to get at what's looking like, what do you think, VM? Bits of that plant, or you think it's bits of grass?
Something from the roots.
Yeah, possibly roots. She's definitely picking her way. Oh, it is that plant there. She's very precisely picking up. At the end of her trunk, she's got two little lips that work like little fingers, which she grabs, and then she winds her trunk around and then pulls it up. Now, we talked about the tush earlier. They're either left tushed or right tush, very similar to us. We're either left-handed or right-handed, but also the way that they curl their trunk to pick up something off the ground is either focused more on the left or the right. And it's a very, very interesting one. This female, her left tusk looks a little bit more used than her right, so she's probably left tusked. Matthew, you're wondering how elephants will get away from predators. Matthew, it's a really interesting question, that. Elephants are very good at smelling out predators when the wind direction is right, and they also have eyesight that's very similar to us, so they can see, and then they hear amazingly well. If this herd of elephants were to come across lions, they would chase those lions away. They would trumpet, and they would stick out their ears, and they would kick up dust, and they would go, "Roar!" And they would come, and they would keep pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing as a group. They'd put all the little ones in the middle, and all the larger ones would come and push them off. So that's one thing that they can do. Another thing that they can do is they can just be more quick than the predators. Now, over a short distance, something like a lion is going to be much quicker than an elephant, but an elephant has a lot of body weight. I mean, this female that we're watching here, she's going to weigh about 3.5 tons. So she is able to maneuver that heavy body and use her trunk and use her whole body in a way that allows her to be not speedier but more adept at getting away from those predators. Also, because her senses are very good, when everything's working in conjunction, she's probably going to know that the predators are there ahead of time. It's not always the case. That being said, predators have an adaptation. They have basically what predators do is they have certain prey species that they like to eat, and there are lions in particular who know how to take down full-grown elephants and hunt them properly, and they choose them in a very specific manner. So the elephants don't always win, but that's very briefly kind of how they would do that. Annalise and Diana, you're wondering if when baby elephants are born, if they can walk fast as well. Interesting question. So when they're born, they're wobbly and they stick very close to the mum, but the breeding herd does not want to leave anyone behind, so the herd will work within the the tolerance of that youngster, and the mom and any of the older siblings will help take care of it. There's a really interesting sequence that was filmed a few years ago. Well, I say a few, it could be maybe up to about 8 years ago, where a mother gave birth to a male calf that was so big coming out of the womb that its legs had been stuck up against its body for so long that it couldn't uncurl them. So the mom had to stay with this little one and kept trying to help it up and help it up and help it up, and the herd had to move on. There was no food or water there, and eventually the mom helped get this baby stable on its feet. It took a couple of days, and then managed to later on meet up with the herd. So there is that chance that things like that will happen, but in general the little elephants stick with the herd, and the herd makes sure that they move in a way that allows the little ones to stay with them. Vildy, if we go up just a touch, perfect. Do you all see that black bird that's sitting right above that little elephant? Alright, that is called a fork-tailed drongo. Fork-tailed because he has a fork tail. And what he's doing is he's following these elephants because every time the elephant moves, it kicks up soil, which kicks up insects, and then it goes down and gets a meal. Oop. There he's flying off. He doesn't want to play that game anymore. Fork-tailed drongo. Oh, it's starting to cool down. There's a beautiful breeze coming through. Lovely. This female here is looking pregnant to me. They're pregnant for about 22 months, and then when the baby's born, they nurse for 24 months, sometimes up to 3 years. And she's looking like she's maybe halfway through her pregnancy. And that's what I would guesstimate from how she's looking. I just want to move the car just a wee bit. Just stick with me. Luke, you're wondering how elephants sleep. Elephants sleep a couple of minutes here, a couple of minutes there. They don't sleep long like we do. And they either do it standing up, or when they're younger, they lie down quite a bit. And again, it's just a rest, and it's usually during the heat of the day. Luke, elephants only digest about 25% of what they eat, so they constantly have to be feeding. They've got quite a large body to feed. So part of the reason why they only sleep a little bit here and a little bit there is that throughout the night and through most of the day they need to be feeding, and then when it's really hot like today, they also need to go for water, and they need to make sure that they're not overeating in one area. They need to make sure that they're eating and then moving on, and then eating and then moving on. Because they eat so much, if they stay in a smaller area, then what ends up happening is they overeat their food source. You can really see how the trunk's working, how she puts all of the leaves and twigs in her mouth. And then what she's doing there is she has molars in her mouth, really big molars. She's got one on top, one on the bottom, either side. And they don't pop up from bottom to top when you get new ones. They rotate in like a conveyor belt from behind. So every now and then she might have 1.5 molars in there. And so she's taking those branches and she's putting them between her teeth, and then she's rubbing them. There's a ridge, and she's rubbing them and then breaking down that food and then swallowing it. Judy, Violet, and Brooke, you all want to know what they use their tails for. They use their tails for swatting flies, pretty much. And then what you'll also notice is the tail will show you whether it's a relaxed elephant or not. So with these elephants that we're watching here, the tail's just swinging like this. That means a very relaxed elephant. If the elephant is not relaxed, the tail will go rigid and stick out. Hello, young boy. Are you going to come say hello? Oh, I hope everyone heard that one. Because elephants, the way that their digestion works, they fart a lot. Elephants and zebra, rhino, warthogs, there's a lot of gas in those bodies, I should say. That was a young male that came past. This is another young male here. He might get curious about us. He's watching us now as he's moving. Micah would like to know, how do elephants communicate with each other? Micah, that's super interesting to think about. Elephants communicate using what we call a tummy rumble. I'm not good at mimicking that one. Hopefully they'll do one for us. They also communicate by trumpeting, but most of their communication is done through their feet into the ground using infrasound or subsonic vibrations, and that communication can travel up to 60 kilometers, 60. And that basically, the research that's being done on that is these elephants can talk to other elephants up to about 60 kilometers and so on and so on. So like a game of telephone, elephants can talk to each other across not just South Africa, but Southern Africa and up into East Africa and other parts like that. It's very, very, very interesting. So a lot of their communication is done where we can't hear it. There's some really interesting research being done on it. I want to say it's out of North Carolina University. If I'm remembering correctly, I'll have to triple check for you on that one. And it's done with the same process that they photographed where they tested whale song under the water. Similar idea. So we've had part of the herd move off just behind us, but the bulk of the herd is still coming. They're slowly meandering. I'm just going to move a little bit forward so you can see what I can see. And while we're waiting for the rest of the herd to come out so you can see them much better, we are going to head on over to Steph, who has a beautiful reptile skin to show you. Oh, Kamuda, tiny little babies. And there's a tiny baby that we'll come back to. He'll come out soon.
Now, you are right there in that you are coming to have a look at a reptile skin, and it's very difficult to say what exact species this is, but it's unmistakable as to what it is, don't you think? This is a snake skin. And for those of you who don't know, snakes shed their skin. Their skin doesn't grow with them, and as they get bigger, they shed their old skin, and their new skin grows underneath and gets hard, and then they grow into their new skin, and when they're finished with that one, they shed that one off and they grow a new one again. And they do it by producing a milky substance which pushes the old skin off their body a little bit, and then they hook their old skin onto a thorn or onto a branch, and they turn it inside out like a sock. And that is exactly what this snake did. Oh no, I broke it. But there you can see how long it was. Let me show you there. This is how long this particular snake was. There's the tip of its tail in my hand, hold on. There's the tip of its tail and its head, you can see, as long as my arm. That's super cool, eh? And here's its head, and you can even see that it had a scale over its eye. So that's how snakes shed their skin. Now Drake, you want to know how many different types of snakes live here? There's a few different types. Off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you exactly how many species of snakes. I want to say it's probably around about 100 or so, maybe a little bit less than 100 different species of snakes, most of which are completely harmless to people. This particular snake, I think, is an eastern tiger snake, just based on the fact that there's these dark chevrons on its skin. You can see there and there and there. And therefore not a very poisonous snake whatsoever. But before this bird flies away, quickly off to Tristan.
Well, our bird is still sitting very happily for us, and it is one of my favorite birds that we get out here. This bird is called a woodland kingfisher and is a migratory bird. Now, what migratory means is that basically this bird flies from one area in the winter and then travels to our area for summer and then back to wherever it goes in the winter. Now, this particular bird itself will migrate into Central and North Africa, where it gets warmer in the winter month, well, in our winter months, and it can follow insects as it goes, because even though it's called a kingfisher, this bird feeds off mostly insects and small mice and lizards and those kind of things. And so it follows the rains basically back north, and because this area is very dry in our winter months. Now, the reason why it's exciting to see this bird is because this bird has only really arrived back this week, and so it brings a lot of color to this area, and it also has a beautiful call that gets everybody always very excited because it means it's the end of the winter and the start of the summer for us here in South Africa. So a very, very, very pretty bird to see, and I always love spending time with them. That particular one wasn't going to hang around for very long. It was right above our heads, and so I didn't think it would be here for long. So, Connor, you say, do I enjoy going on these safaris? It looks so cool. Connor, it is undoubtedly the best thing in the world. I love every minute of being out here. I have always loved being out here, and I think I always will. We have a situation where we get to see animals every day. We're out in the sunshine and in nature. So Connor, I absolutely love doing these safaris, and I love the fact that you guys all the way on the other side of the world are able to join us for them, and I'm glad that you're saying that it looks very, very cool. And I hope that one day, Connor, that you'll come out into Africa and come and see all of these animals for yourself at some point. So I hope that you do get to do that, because it is as cool as it looks. Now, while I kind of go through the riverbed and try and not get stuck in all the sand that is here, let's go back to Noel and those beautiful big elephants.
They are beautiful big Ellies indeed, Tristan. We have two youngsters that are busy hanging around mum/auntie just at the backside. So our visual at the moment is not 150%, but what we're doing is we're just waiting to see which direction they move so that we can see where we need to move. So you can see on the left-hand side of the screen there's a little one flapping his ears, and then the other little one is underneath the big one on the right-hand side, flapping the ears there. So they were tussling earlier. Elephants love to play, and they love to play when they're little, and they love to play when they're teenagers. They enjoy it. It helps build their muscles. And it also is a way for them to connect with each other within the breeding herds. Breeding herds are like having a big family. So it's not just your mom and your sisters and your brothers. It's also your aunties and your cousins. So dad won't be around. The male elephants, when they're about 15 to 18, get moved away and then go off sort of on their own, just to leave the breeding herds with the mums and the aunties and everybody together and in a very calm scenario. And what you'll see with all of these elephants that we're watching, like we talked about before, super, super calm and very relaxed, just feeding away. Evelyn, you would like to know how big are elephants' feet. So everything comes in small, medium, and large. This Ellie that we're looking at the moment's feet are probably the size of a soccer ball and a half. That's what I would say. So you have to flatten your soccer ball. Maybe it's better to do it in pancake size. So we call pancakes flapjacks here. So flapjacks such pancakes. If your mom or dad has a really big pan at home that makes you pancakes, flapjacks, it would be like the size of the biggest pan you could find and then some. That's the best way I know how to put it. I hope that helps, Evelyn. Can everybody hear them eating? So sometimes when we're looking for elephants, like Steph on his own 2 feet, that's what you're listening for. Ryan, you're wondering if elephants and rhinos interact. Is that correct, Kirst? So Maya, you're wondering if elephants and rhino interact. They do. And sometimes it's just ignoring each other, and sometimes it's pretty difficult, and rhino or elephant might try and kill each other. It all depends on what the resources are like. So if it's the middle of summer and we've had very good rain and the resources are good, then there won't be too much interaction that results in anything negative. But if it's very low resources and it's winter time and they really haven't had a chance to to get enough nutrients in, then sometimes the interactions are quite rough. I've watched a female white rhino with a tiny calf chase away a herd of elephants, and I've watched a female elephant similar to this one that we're looking at now kill a white rhino, a big I believe it was a female white rhino, sort of tusted in the side. So they do interact, and it just depends. Every scenario is different, so it depends on what's happening around as to how that interaction functions. All right, everybody, I want to say thank you so much for joining us. Your questions have been amazing. We hope that you enjoyed. We have to say goodbye now, unfortunately, but have fun for the rest of your school day. And then we're going to head back over to Tristan and see what's happening that side.
Well, we've managed to bump into the Styx Pride. They are south of us, quite a long way south. It's not a great visual, as you can see. There's an itching Styx cub because of that mange that they've got, but they are not far from our boundary at all. Now, whether or not we're going to see them for much longer, I'm not quite sure. If they just move slightly to the right, we're not going to have any view, or in fact, left or right. They go behind quite a few thickets, and it was just out of nowhere that we were driving past and I saw a car and then a lion standing up, and so that's how we managed to spot them. But the whole Styx Pride, I believe, is there, and Tinyo is also still there at the moment. So I'm hoping that this afternoon they are going to come north towards Gowrie Main and maybe even towards Twin Dams. They are lying not that far from the boundary, and now that we got a bit of overcast conditions, I wonder if that maybe is going to get them going a little earlier, and maybe they'll head towards Twin Dams for a late afternoon drink. I'm hoping that's the case, but nice to see it regardless. I didn't think we would see these guys. I heard that they were south in Little Gowrie and that they were, well, it looks like they're going deeper in. Unfortunately, they're going the wrong way at this stage, so maybe they're going to plonk down. I still see one or two of them lying down there. It's not a great view at all. As you can see, there's a tummy that's moving and stretching, but they look like they're heading the wrong way for us, unfortunately. Like I say, I was hoping they were going to cross this little drainage and come up and towards us and towards this area, but they might be heading a little further south from here because there might be some water in that section. So I'm going to try and see if I can just get a better view somehow here. I don't know if that's going to be possible, and I'm going to check if there's any way that we can see anything different. But while I do that, let's go back across to the bush whisperer himself, Stefan Winterberg, who's 2 miles north of me and is showing you the smaller things.
Seeing lions is always special here, but so is seeing something amazing. And have a look at this. This is the nest of a delta wasp. Now, delta wasps are some of the oldest types of wasps, which are some of the most advanced insects on the face of the planet. And this would have been made at the end of last year or the year before. She, the female wasp, would have brought a piece of mud at a time, a ball of mud at a time, and then using vibrations that she makes with her body, would have welded one piece of mud to another. She would have created a couple of compartments inside this mud, and in there she would have laid an egg per compartment and stuffed the compartment with paralyzed worms and larvae. Now, I know that I can probably open this without too much of a worry because it is from last year, and show you inside. Now, you can see that that's where the larvae dug out, and that's why I know that I'm not doing any damage to any young larvae or young wasps inside there. And it's now become the home of a bunch of different things, spiders, and it's just going to be interesting to see what's actually inside here. So these are all egg casings of spiders. You can see there's some old eggs. That's the old wasp egg. This is just so interesting, man, to see what goes in here. And they prey on almost everything. Let's see what was inside here now. There's just some fungus left over, spider web of some sort. That's the leftover of the caterpillar that the wasp larvae would have fed on. Now, it's not uncommon for these wasps, the larvae themselves, to be parasitized by other insects. Let's open up another cavity and see what other surprises are in here for us. These are all just from last year. There's a bunch of eggs you can see that have been opened, and then the youngster has come out, and a bunch of them. Look there and there. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now, and 10 eggs in that one. Oh, there we've even got a spider, look. Hiding out inside there. So using the discarded remnants as a refuge. That's super cool. I wonder what spider that is. Hello there. And if you're even still alive. It's not uncommon for wasps to put spiders inside these breeding balls. What they do is they sting the spider in a very specific place in its body and it paralyzes it. And then the living spider is then stuffed into one of these holes and an egg is laid on it. And the wasp larvae then hatches, and wasp larvae are carnivorous and will start to eat the spider, but all the non-essential organs first. So legs and then the abdomen and bits and pieces of the digestive tract. And as it gets bigger, so the spider gets smaller, until eventually the wasp larvae then consumes the spider, and at that stage it's developed enough energy to metamorphosize from larvae to wasp, and then digs its way out of these shelters and flies away as a fully grown wasp. It's difficult to say what has now happened inside there. The only way I can really do it is by blowing on it. I don't think that spider's alive at all. Let's test it with a piece of grass. I don't want to stick my knife in there because it'll hurt it. And also don't want to just stick a grass in there, because if it is alive, spiders' bodies are soft. So I like to chew the piece of grass first, and then let's see. Oh, it is alive. Oh, look at that. You can see it inside there. Quite special.
Yeah, it's so dark.
Well, it's a bit dark. So let's turn around a little bit and give you a bit more light inside there. And see if we can, with some light, get inside there. A bit better?
Yeah.
Alright, now what to do? Because obviously I've now broken the spider's home, and this is where it lives and is breeding, so let's make a plan. So let's put this into a bush. Leave it there. Should be okay. This bush doesn't get fed on by elephants, and it should be okay for the rest of the season. And hopefully that spider's not too hard done by. Alright, and we're off to go and see those elephants that Tristan is with.
Well, indeed, we've got a beautiful herd of ellies that have just finished drinking at Chitwa. Unfortunately, they are highly mobile now, moving away from the dam, and so our time with them is going to be all of about 2 minutes before they cross the cut line, unfortunately. But still beautiful to see. The whole lot of them are just coming across the open area. They've now gone into this thicker, denser bush that we have here, and are slowly going to probably start feeding for the afternoon. What I'm going to try and do is just try and get around them and try and head to the other side where we can just catch them before they cross the cut line, because they are heading in that direction and it looks like they are going to cross into Little Gowrie, and so I just want to quickly get into that direction and just hopefully spend a little bit longer with them, and hopefully we'll be able to get a really nice view of all of them. Now there is one female that's a little bit grumpy and a little bit on her sort of not her best behavior this afternoon, and she's just shook her head at me, so I'm going to try not go too close to her. I want to try and give her as wide a berth as is possible and try and leave her as much space as possible. But I always love coming to Chitwa Dam, and this is the reason why, is because there is always something going on at this dam. It's never a quiet sort of moment here. There's always something happening, and the ellies absolutely love it. And on a hot day like we've had today, the cold water of Chitwa Dam is the perfect place for an ellie just to go and cool off. So let's just try and get a little further. We're not far from where we need to be because they are slowly meandering, but if I just get in front of them, hopefully we can watch them kind of moving towards us ever so gently, and we'll get a really good view of all of them coming out. Now the cut line is not far. There it is. Just trying to find the road quickly. Got to negotiate this area a little bit. There's a few trees we don't want to drive over because they are not great for my tires. There we go. So this was the very, very quick shortcut that we just took to get round to the other side. So here we go. Stevie, you're wondering if an elephant had an injured ear, would it overheat? Now, Stevie, it depends on how severe the injuries are, and it would have to be both ears in order to give it a problem. But then what you would find is elephants, being as intelligent as they are, would probably then go and find more water sources to go and just cool down in water. You can see they're moving very quickly. They're not really going very slowly, except that they rub up on every tree they can. How cool is that? What are you doing, girl? She's having a really good rub on that marula tree, and so after a bit of sort of washing and spraying of water and mud, it's always good to go and rub up on a tree. It just helps to exfoliate and get rid of all of those parasites and various other things. But sorry, Stevie, I got sidetracked a bit. They always love watching. Oh yes, hello. Now, in terms of their ears, they would go and find water, they would go and find some way of cooling down, spend more time in the shade, less time in the sun, and that would really help them. But for the most part, even if they've got some sort of damage to the ear, they're actually okay, because I've seen elephants that have half an ear that are still able to cope with this heat and survive just fine. So it's not something that is completely required that both ears have to be fully functional. Even if one is slightly kind of broken and skewed off a little bit, it doesn't really matter too much. It's still okay, and the ellies will survive under these extreme conditions even with that. So like I said, I'll just go and find water or something to that degree. This poor marula has been rubbed on by everybody. Everybody's decided to have a little kind of rub as they've gone along. But what a beautiful herd. It's a nice big herd, lots of little babies in it, a few big cows as well, and you can see they're just busy crossing the road at the moment, so slowly but surely just kind of ambling along there on all sides of us at the moment. So nice to see. And like I said, it's a pity we didn't get them coming the other way, going towards Chitwa Dam. I would have loved to have seen them coming down to the water itself and having a good splash. And there's lots of babies like this. It's always wonderful to see them as they make their way towards water. Philip, so they're not rubbing for the same reason that a cat is rubbing all the time. So cats do rub because of glands on underneath their eyes. Their preorbital glands just help with scent marking and allowing them to kind of leave their scent behind. That one's covered in dirt by the looks of things. And so whereas elephants is a little bit different. Is that dirt, or is it the skin of this elephant itself? It looks like the skin. I wonder if that elephant... Hang on a second. That's really interesting. I wonder if this elephant doesn't have a little bit of leucism in it. So I have seen pink elephants before. It's not an uncommon thing. Generally, if you look at their eyes, I don't know if Sense, if you can maybe try and get in on the eye there, maybe it's got a different color eye to it. Sometimes you'll find elephants with that coloration will have bright blue eyes. No, don't turn your head this way. No, don't go that way. Let's just keep on that elephant quickly. But it looks like a form of leucism. So like I say, when they're leucistic, they will get a little bit of pink skin like that, and they will get a blue colored eye, which is pretty incredible. So let's see, maybe Sense, if you can try and go back to it, and hopefully it will turn at some point and we'll be able to see exactly what it is. It would be amazing if it does have a bluish tinge to the eye. It's that elephant right there. Come on, just turn your head for me. And there's those pink legs that we're talking about, but that's definite pinkness that's coming through. The thing about it though is it's not all over the body. That's what makes me think that it could be something else, although I see it goes up towards the tummy, and it's far too kind of spread to be fire damage, and there's no scarring in that area. So it's not from a fire that's hurt that elephant in any way. That's more looks like a leucistic individual, which is really very, very cool. It's not something you see every day at all. And there used to be an elephant here in the Sabi Sands that had a slight pinkish tone like that and had the most incredible sapphire blue eyes. I have a photo of it somewhere, and I'll try and find it for you so I can show you guys. But it was the most incredible elephant, and it was one of those that I hoped that I would see more of, because the times that I did get photos of it where they weren't very good, and I really wanted to get an incredible photo of that bright icy blue eye in relation to the elephants. But how cool was that? That was very, very cool. But back to the sort of question about whether or not they rub on things in the same way that cats do. Elephants are doing it more just to look after their skin and to create a situation where they get rid of any dead skin cells, parasites, those kind of things, and make sure that they're in great condition. So that's why they do it, as opposed to the cats that are more just trying to mark their scent on specific trees and various other things. Well, that was the most incredible way to spend an afternoon. I love spending time with Ellies, and we've been so fortunate and spoiled to have such a big herd like that move around us, including what looks like a leucistic elephant. It really doesn't get too much better than that. And so hopefully, we'll kind of end on that real note, and then hopefully we'll have a situation where we'll find even if we don't find anything else, it's been absolutely wonderful just to spend time with the Ellies themselves.